Starting now.
Of Major League Baseball. I will bang the gavel to ring it into order. 3 gavels, and the lucky piece of wood there. Welcome to the September 2020 Omaha Astronomical Society meeting. I need to click on this. So, we'll take our meeting moment as we begin. If you have headphones, please use them with the meeting. Please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. The space bar can act as a push to talk button. If you do not want to be seen, you may mute your video. You may want to change your view to side-by-side during the meeting, or if you would like, you can use the gallery view, which is everybody, otherwise known as the Hollywood Squares or Brady Bunch. You can raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of the participants list. To file a motion, please unmute and state your name. And to vote, we can look at everybody, raise your name or say aye, things like that, or use the raise hand button, one or the other. Do we have any guests this evening out there?
Here's your chance, Tom. Speak up.
Me? I'm not a guest. I guess I am. You'll be tired of hearing about me, so I don't need to say anything.
They might be talking about me too, because
oh, good, another Tom.
I'm back to this for a while.
I'll call you Wilson.
Okay.
So I'll say we have 1. So I'll do my regular spiel. As a member of the OAS, you will also be a member of the Astronomical League and will receive the Reflector Quarterly Magazine. You'll get access to Astro Park, our observing site near Weeping Water, Nebraska. We have a great telescope loan program where you can try out a telescope, observe, and experience the different types of scope. We have our big monthly newsletter, The Stella, which is chock full of information and is a great resource. Plus, we also have a Discord server set up for members to collaborate and talk, share pictures, talk about equipment, things like that. Our presenter tonight is going to be Tom Field. He's going to talk about You Can Always Touch the Stars. Tom has been a contributing editor to Sky and Telescope magazine for the past 7 years. He's also the author of the RSpec software, which received the Sky and Telescope Hot Product Award in 2011. Tom is a popular speaker who has spoken to hundreds of clubs via the web at many conferences, including NEAF, the NEAF Imaging Conference, PATS, the Winter Star Party, the Advanced Imaging Conference, SCAE, and others. His enthusiastic style is lively and engaging. He promises to open the door for you to this fascinating field. And I'm going to turn off my screen share. And then I will say, please welcome Tom Field.
Thanks, John.
Tom, I gave you also co-host capabilities, so you do have control to mute or unmute everybody and all the other host capabilities.
Great. Well, let's thanks.
Hey, Tom.
Thanks, Louis. Yeah, let's try. If you want to interrupt me, we'll see how it works. And if you want to hold your question until after I'm done, then that's fine too. I'll hang out afterwards until you yank me off the stage. So. Let me share my screen here. There we go. So, John, shake your head. Yeah, you can see. Are your mic's on, in fact?
Yes, I can see it. Yep.
Great. Good.
Pink Floyd.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good evening and thanks. I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes tonight. I love this group. And I love coming early and having this social hour at 15 minutes or so, because I feel more like I'm speaking to friends instead of just speaking to an audience. In these days of COVID, it's nice to have some of that socializing. So how have we managed to discover so much about the universe when we really haven't left home at all, We can see images of the universe and, in 2 dimensions, and we can get fleeting glimpses of another dimension. Let me move that off the screen. You may not have seen that yet. And if we watch a while using, the time dimension, the 4th dimension, we can see stars changing. And if we spread the colors out, we get this as if fifth dimension. I find this just aesthetically really beautiful, let alone the science. Sometimes I look at it and go, well, let's see, where does the blue turn into green or the green turn into yellow? And of course, there's no one spot. But this fifth dimension, it reveals a barcode for not only our star, that there was, I keep meaning to change this from our stars to all stars. And I just need to modify the PowerPoint show. These barcodes help us understand a lot about the stars. And they say, 60, 70, 80% of the research that gets done astronomically uses spectroscopy. Even if you're not an observer, even if you're not an imager and never plan to do this, I think you'll, from my talk, get an appreciation for what this is all about. And that will carry over into the reading that you do. Again, there's not a lot of complicated math or physics or astrophysics, but understanding how we've learned so much is really an important thing, I think, and brings us a lot of enjoyment in other activities. And I'll talk about that a little later. So you can see, I won't read the bullets here, but there's lots of things that we can see about a star. Let's go back to that for a second. I think it's particularly interesting that that we'll see, and I'll give examples of these. I'll show you examples done by amateurs, that we can see things about the star's rotation in place. So in these talks, I often, over the years, have thought about, well, what's my goal? And I mentioned that a little earlier when we were chatting. And I thought, well, I'm just going to write down for you, show you the key points that I want to communicate. One is, if you are an imager, or maybe you used to be an imager, that thrill of your first image, not only spectrum. For me, it was the moon. It was out of focus. It was overexposed. I imagine yours might have been too. Still, it was the most beautiful image. I showed it to my wife and my friends and colleagues. But that thrill fades. And I found by getting into this, that first time you capture a spectrum and then going forward additionally, that thrill is regenerated. Maybe you want to do some science, either contribute to pro-am activities, or you just want to try and do some of the things that have been done over the last 150 or 200 years. My wife, I call the credit card scrutineer. And whether it's her or me, of course, none of us like making big investments unless we think we're going to get a return on it. And it's hard to know with a new activity. I'm going to show you some really inexpensive ways to go about it. I think this is the most important point I'd like to make tonight. And that is, if you own the data, you've run it through software or you've captured it, your relationship to it is very different. I mean, mostly when most of us read, we read sort of passively. We don't really identify something that we want to dig further into. If you do, then congratulations, but I'm pretty lazy. But when it's your own data, when it's my own data, I find my relationship is such that I'll go out and read a little bit about it, and more importantly, I'll remember it because I already have a pigeonhole in which to put that new reading. You don't have to drive out to Weeping Waters. It's Weeping Water or Weeping Waters. I thought I'd be so clever and say the name, but I don't know if there's a plural in that.
Singular.
Singular, good, okay. Thanks. The thing is, with visual imaging, we're really impacted by light pollution, and that's not the same with what we're doing here. And listen, I'm a knuckle-dragging programmer. I don't have a PhD in astrophysics. This stuff isn't hard to understand, and the cool thing is, you can dig as deep or as shallow as you want. I'm like one of those really broad rivers. It's really broad, but it's not very deep, and that's okay. So I'm also not a particularly good imager. I don't have the location or the equipment or skills or patience to do the kinds of gorgeous images that some people do. I'm glad they do, so we can all enjoy them. I'm certainly not a do-it-yourselfer. I break just about everything I touch. In fact, in Windows, my favorite keystroke is Control-Z or Edit Undo. So on occasion, I've wished I had that key in life, you know. But this isn't like, well, I've got to build it so I can do it kind of thing. I know the club does outreach. I looked a little bit online, and you were talking about it earlier. This is a wonderful outreach activity. And of course, Steve had mentioned some that he does. I'm going to show you some cool screens that really draw a crowd and help you transition into talking a little more science when you're doing outreach. And of course, mentoring is something you can do. And finally, you might want to capture star spectra if you want to hang out with a cool crowd. That's not me. I'm a wannabe. But there's a lot of amateurs doing this kind of thing. And like most small groups like this, we all love, or most of us love, helping people. So let's dive in. I'm going to talk a little bit about science. I'm going to move very quickly just to get everybody to approximately the same level. Forgive me if these are familiar concepts to you. Sir Isaac Newton discovered you could put light through a prism and split it into its component colors. You can also get a rainbow by just bouncing the light off of a finely lined surface like that DVD, or even through a piece of glass that has these very fine lines, like 100 lines per millimeter. So they're really fine lines. Bunsen, he invented the Bunsen burner because he wanted to burn samples, put the resulting light through a prism, and look at the results. And the great thing was, he was like a pyromaniac. He burnt everything and he kept records. And those records came to serve us going forwards. And we'll see a little bit more about that. A fun trivia fact about Bunsen, he did not patent the Bunsen burner. He said, this should be available for humanity to, do good in science and help us all live better lives. A remarkable attitude, very noble. I wanted to mention this guy Kirchhoff over here. We're not going to talk a lot about him. He was a colleague of Bunsen's, except one thing in particular, just part of this next slide. There's two different kinds of spectrums you can get. This is called an absorption spectrum. Notice it's got a rainbow, right, in Roy G. Biv order, but it's got gaps, absorption gaps. And this down here, of course, is called an emission spectrum. It's a more or less black background with just some emission lines. Now, the interesting thing about these is the lines are in the same position, regardless of which one you get. And we don't really care for the purposes of what we're doing tonight, which one we look at. We'll see examples of both. Which one you get depends on something about how the spectrum is produced, the gas that the light is going through, but we need not worry about that. So these spectra are like chemical fingerprints. This is that CSI thing. And you can see, for example, that hydrogen has a line, an emission line in this case, but helium doesn't have that line there at all. And in fact, the hydrogen lines are so commonly used that we've given them a name, which I'll be referring to them to tonight, bomber lines. And we've actually given the lines themselves Greek letters like we give to the constellation stars in order of brightness. So here's a cool thing. We created this a couple years ago. Mostly it's used by teachers, but amateurs like it too. You can see here hydrogen, alpha, beta, and gamma lines. Oh, the gamma line is there. Notice those lines are very different, as we saw on the previous slide too, from helium and all the other lines. It's pretty cool. It's a beautiful poster, and I can brag for a second and tell you that Neil deGrasse Tyson told me that he's got one hanging on his office wall. And the story about how that happened is for Q&A if everybody's not snoring. So we don't have to burn things anymore like Bunsen did. We actually now use gas tubes like this one I've got over here. This is a helium gas tube. And these gas tubes are just, you can see, it's just like a fluorescent tube, but it's got a gas in it. It's interesting in my earphones. Oh, look at that. I don't know if you can see it coming on. Looks like maybe you can. Looks like I'm lighting it up with my body's static electricity or ground. I'm probably grounding out one of those electrodes. I wondered why my heart was beating so weird. So where were we? Oh, so and I mentioned for those of you who teach or used to teach, we created this little tripod spectrometer a couple years ago, and we've got a lot of them in the field now, all sorts of chemistry, physics, and of course astronomy. So instead of those slides that Steve was showing us earlier, which can be a little frustrating to students, same software, students see the spectrum right up on the blackboard or whiteboard. I guess I'm dating myself when I say blackboard. So I'm going to jump around time-wise a little bit. In 1835, this guy said, stars are too far away to study. We'll never know what they're made of. But it was only several decades later that all sorts of people were studying the stars with spectra. So far, everybody I've mentioned have been old white men. So let's look at some of the women in the field. First of all, Annie Jump Cannon and her computers. were prohibited from accessing the telescopes because of their gender about 100 years ago, a little more. So what they did fortuitously for all of us is they were given the photographic plates of spectra to study. And maybe some of you are aware of this, but I mean, they looked at tens of thousands of spectra. And they began to see the patterns, and they actually came up with the classification scheme that helps us understand the stars and classify them. Priyamvada Nataraja is at Yale, and she studies black holes and gravitational lensing. Nancy Grace Roman was the first astronomer at NASA. She got her PhD in the late 40s. And she really, it was her vision that the Hubble Space Telescope should happen. She really drove it. Elisa Quintana studies exoplanets. And finally, Jedediah Eisler's at Dartmouth, and she studies also black holes and something else that I can't remember. This is a relatively new slide for me. It was exciting. It was like diving down a rabbit hole when I started researching women in the field. There are so many out there. They have more opportunities today, but we're not there yet. I did notice when I was looking at the attendees to the meeting, your club actually has a higher representation of women in the club. Congratulations for that. I'm not exactly sure the total ratio, because I don't know if Kelly's a woman, I don't know if V's a woman. And while I was looking at names, Janine, I love the spelling of your name. I've never seen it spelled that way. So let's move on. Last bit of science as an introduction, and then we'll charge ahead. How do we get these absorption and emission lines? Well, the Bohr model, another white man, says that we have orbits that electrons are going around in, and they're numbered for talking about them. And when an electron jumps, it gives off energy. Sometimes we can see. Different jumps, like this one's from, let's see, this red one is from level 3 to level 2. You get a different color, different energy. And the last one I'll show you is this one from, let's see, that's level 4 to level 2. That's the hydrogen beta line, the hydrogen bomber beta line that we'll be seeing a lot of tonight. So suppose the electron's jumping up. Well, in that case, you get that absorption spectrum with a rainbow and just a gap. And as I said, we're going to see examples of that tonight. So here's the Hubble spectrograph. It's being serviced by the space shuttle. And my grandson says that's not a scientific instrument. He says it's a refrigerator and it's filled with beer, because when the space shuttle was flying, they were real partying animals at night. And of course, on the space shuttle, you get a lot of nights in 24 hours. And we also need not dig into that. So here's Dale Mace's setup here. You can see it's pretty complicated. It looks pretty expensive. We'll move on quickly here, but I really like seeing that tube there because right at the end of it, like right there, you can see two little pins, some sort of calibration gas tube. And I pictured Dale with like two alligator clips with high voltage trying to clip on there. And I mean, yeah, you can get a shock, but worse, if you draw a spark, you ruin your night vision. That's awful. So, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. And what I'm going to talk about mostly tonight, show you examples of just a simple 1.25" grating called a star analyzer. It sells for about $200. And here's the first example of it in use. Just screwed on to the lens cap threads of a DSLR. Pointed at Vega, and there's a hydrogen alpha, hydrogen beta, hydrogen gamma. So what's happening here, the starlight as it leaves the star is going through those outer layers, and those outer layers, for technical reasons, scientific reasons, are causing these electrons to jump between levels. And when they jump, they either emit or they give off light. That's how we get those gaps in those lines. Notice this doesn't have any tracking. It's possible to do, but it's a nuisance. It's small aperture. You've got to get everything lined up and, you know, long exposures. So I show this slide only that you should know there's no magic here. There's not some literal black box. I'll show you some of those in a moment. It's just this grating, which acts just like a prism. So here's some examples of the way you can mount the grating. I showed you that already, but the one thing I wanted to show here is that adapter that threads onto the lens cap threads to adapt your Canon or most any camera down to the 1.25", and then the light goes through like this, goes through the grating and then through the lens. You can use a Fitz camera, it can be color, mono, cool or not. As in visual imaging, mono is going to be more sensitive and get better scientific results. But color has its place too, and certainly in outreach and education. You can mount it on a, well, I've disassembled it here during a technical support call an hour ago. But here's a ZWO camera, and you can just thread the star analyzer right onto the nose piece. And finally, you can put it in a filter wheel. So there's lots of ways to mount these things. There are more expensive by an order of magnitude devices that have a slit. And a slit gives you higher resolution. But the penalty you pay is, first, it's a lot more money, but it's also harder to use. Imagine a 20 micron slit, that's 20 millionths of a, what is that, 20 millionth of a centimeter or meter? John, you must know, right? How big is a micron? I think it must be of a meter. It's smaller than the width of a hair. So imagine acquiring, God, now I'm blushing. Now I need mono now. So imagine acquiring your target. See, that's not rehearsed. Like I said, these talks are always different. You've got to acquire your target and then track on it through a slit. So there's just a steep learning curve in terms of capturing data as well as processing it. So 1 in 100 or 200 starts with one of these. There actually are some 3D printed ones that you can make for yourself that are considerably less expensive and do a decent job. You can mount a DSLR on the back of your telescope and do some other imaging, as well as piggybacked imaging of spectrum. All right, so we raced through that history theory equipment. What can we actually do? So you take the starlight, you put it through a grating, you get a rainbow, a spectrum, right? And you can capture that on your camera. Let's look at our first example. This is really an amazing example. These are all different spectra captured at a different time. These were captured by a guy named Torsten Hansen, and he did this with just an 8-inch Newtonian and an imaging source video camera. That's what I mean. You don't need long exposures. You don't need big aperture. These are in temperature order. So the hot stars at the top, and then as we go down through, the cooler stars. So these are type B, B stars, A stars, F, K, and M. Look at those differences. So this is the first step in understanding, a qualitative step, more or less, of understanding the stars. Different stars, because they have different temperatures, have different spectra. So we're on our way to getting actionable or scientific data from a simple piece of equipment. Just 2 examples of how they differ here. The first is, if I can find my mouse, the first is down here. Notice those wide bands on these cool type M stars. Those wide bands are from complex molecules, not just simple elements. These happen to be titanium oxide. Now, truth be known, I don't know anything more about titanium oxide than that. What I do know is that these stars, these cool stars, are cool enough that they don't burn up and break apart these molecules. That's why those bands exist. So when you see bands, you know you're looking at a cool star. The only other example I wanted to look at on this page is this strip right here. Around 4800, this is that hydrogen beta line I warned you about that I'd be talking about ad nauseum. So notice that this one is darker and wider than the ones above it or below it. Why would that be? Well, it's something to do with temperature, right? Remember, these absorption lines are being created when an electron moves between level 4 and level 2. So, or level 2. So it's got to get up there, right? It's got to get up there and then it's got to drop. And so these hot stars up here they're so hot that the electrons get bumped right past that level 4. A lot of them don't stop there to drop down. And same thing with these cool stars. A lot of the electrons don't get pumped up to that level to drop down. So basically what we're seeing here is a temperature-related phenomena again. So I just wanted to show you that. Let's move on real quickly here. See that crosshairs there? So I don't know if you can see in the robin egg blue, there's a little bit of dimming there. I don't know if that's my imagination. I know what I'm looking for. So if I was trying to try and submit and publish a paper, said, yeah, we used the Hubble spectrograph and we saw an absorption dimming right in the robin egg blue, they'd go, we're not publishing it, right? So we need to be quantitative. So we graph the intensity. Now this is pretty simple. Stick with me here. And that is, this axis is intensity. And the star here is narrow and bright. So this peak is narrow and bright here. It's typical star peak if you're familiar with looking at those. And this feature here is dim, brighter, 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 dimmer, dimmer, right? So this is dim, brighter, 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 dimmer, dimmer. But look at this. That dip that maybe you could see is now very clear in that graph. Now we're doing science. Now we can look at the depth of that, the full width half maximum. Where is it located? How's it compared to other stars? How's it compared to other people's spectrometers? All sorts of things. How do we get that graph? So my story is in 2009, I bought a grating and I took my C8 outside, right outside those windows here in Seattle, 3 miles from Pike Place Market. It was August. I set my telescope up. I captured some video of Vega with some cheap webcam. Came in at midnight, grass stains on my knees, right? Because it's Vega in August. And the next morning, Sunday morning, I tried to create the graph and I failed. I was using some shareware that's available. And it was crashing. It was half in French. There was no manual. And it just wasn't written to the usability level that we've become accustomed to with modern software. I gave up. I quit. I told my wife, this isn't fun. This is a hobby. I don't want to be frustrated. I mean, persistence has some value, but not in the face of the odds I felt I was facing. So I gave up. I threw it in the drawer. And a couple weeks later, I thought, well, maybe because I've developed software for ages, maybe I'll just write a program to create the graph. So Saturday I did that. Sunday I had the graph. And now, about 11 years later and 10 or 15,000 hours later, I'm almost done. So, you know, the thing is, you love what you create. And I love the software. And I love helping people get started. So I hadn't intended to create a product, but it just led to that. But I'll tell you, I think one of the obstacles to getting started in a new field like this is, and I felt the same way as you just heard, I don't want to go up another learning curve. So I want to show you, I'm not going to do a full-blown software demo, so you don't have to rush off and get a lot of coffee. But I want to show you just for a minute or two the software running so you can see what it's all about. So there's our spectrum. There's the star. And there's the spectrum. There's a gap there, and there's some there. Now, this could have been in color. It could be mono. It could be from a video, fits camera, whatever. It doesn't matter. And all you do to get that graph is bracket in the region you want to study, and then just go like that, and you've got the graph. So that peak there is, of course, the star. And this thing is that. And look at all those lines. Well, that creates another problem, another obstacle. Listen, I said I'm not an astrophysicist. How do I identify what those dips are? Remember I mentioned that Bunsen created a catalog of everything he burnt, including hydrogen and helium gas tubes. So built into the software is that data. And so and it's a little more recently created than that, but same source. Let's look at what it looks like. I'm going to come down here to Hydrogen Bomber. See, I got a laugh on that from somebody, and that's the first time I've used that line. So I don't know if that's John hiding behind a laugh or not, but
I laughed, yes.
Good. All right. Well, you'll get your commission in the mail. Thanks. He's a ringer, you know. So let's turn on the reference lines for Hydrogen Bomber series here. Look at that. Those lines go through our dip, 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 and maybe a couple down there. That's pretty good evidence on my C8 with a webcam, first night out, 3 miles from Pike Place Market, that I've detected hydrogen on Vega. That was mind-blowing to me, and it still is. So now there's a lot of other things we can do here that we won't look at. We can, of course, give it a little color for pizzazz, you know, if we're doing outreach. And then this is actually that first video I made. Let's play it. It's playing at 2 frames per second. This is moving around, as is the graph, because our scene was changing. But the software has some rudimentary stacking. When I stack, watch how quickly this stabilizes. At 2 frames per second, maybe it was, you know, 6 or 8 frames. So that's, oh, and then normally that's in color, just for a little bit more eye candy. So this really makes an effective outreach tool, because from this you can just dive into anything. Steve, you were mentioning those little slides that you use. And that people sort of relate to things. They know that this is something to do with identifying CSI, like the composition of things. A lot of people I found remember that it was the 3rd or 4th remake of Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he talked about this. So it's surprising how well educated people are. Vague, but they understand what's going on. So we're going to leave this now. I want you to, if in your mind's eye, you could just keep that in mind, right? It's the spectrum of Vega, and it's got these bomber lines here, here, and here, because I'm going to show you in a few minutes a scientific discovery that used that information. So here's some outreach, for example, that was done. This is in Marseille, in France. These were gas tubes they were starting with. I don't think you do this at a dark sky party, but you can see that it's a crowd pleaser. So here's a wide field DSLR image with the star analyzer. Notice that, for example, this Wolf-Rayet star, that's its spectrum. Here, the technical term isn't this, but I like to call it lumpy, right? Those are emission lines. Most stars have absorption lines like we've been seeing so far. In fact, let's look at a Wolf-Rayet star. So Janet Simpson in the UK sent this to me years ago. And this is the synthesized spectrum. She sent me this graph. She sent me the graph too, actually. And I have a confession to make to the group, and I like making this confession, and that is, I didn't remember what a Wolf-Rayet star was when she sent this to me. I'd read about them, a half a dozen or more times, but like I said, I didn't have any reference. It just went in one ear and out the other. So Wikipedia is always our friend, right? Wolf-Rayet stars are late stage stars. They're like 25 times the size of the sun, more massive than the sun. And again, they have very intense stellar winds. The outside shell is starting to dissipate. And we're seeing the carbon of these Wolf-Rayet stars, not hydrogen, not helium, carbon. Remember, stars burn through different elements, and eventually they get up to carbon. So this is also the reason we can see these is these are very wide because of that intense stellar wind. Now, if you were to capture the spectrum, maybe you'd read the few paragraphs on Wikipedia I've read and now regurgitated, or maybe you'd spend a month reading about Wolf-Rayet stars or asking people about them. It's really up to you. So you don't have to be an astrophysicist. Here's the Ring Nebula with a slitless grating like the Star Analyzer. It looks a little different, doesn't it? It's just got two emission lines. And you can see them because the object is actually repeated all the way across the view. Fortunately, there's only two lines in this, so we don't have this smear of object, 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 object all the way across, which would just be a gray muddle. But this is the only extended object that looks interesting without a slit. Let's look at an extended object with a slit. Here's our beautiful Orion Nebula, right? Same elements, right? Hydrogen, ionized oxygen. Of course, this is the beginning of stellar life instead of the end. But it's certainly an extended object. Now, because this is such a fun group, I'm going to turn off screen sharing for a second because I need some audience participation. So I'd like somebody to step up and unmute themselves and tell us, or more than one person, the first time that you saw M42. What was your experience? What did it look like? What did you come away with? Especially if it was one of the first things you ever looked at. Does anybody want to mention that or share that with the group? Bueller, anyone? Anyone?
I'm trying to think. I remember showing it to my grandmother once.
What did she think?
Well, she'd never seen anything through a telescope before, so she was kind of really surprised.
What did it look like, do you think?
To her, she said it looked like a little cloud.
Yeah.
Was just there.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share? That's the answer I was looking for, and I'll explain why in a second, John. But okay, well, let's
agree.
Move. Oh, you agree?
This is Tom Wilson.
Hi, Tom.
The first time I seen it was actually in a large telescope, and I'm like, that's it? Little, isn't it? And it looked like a gray smudge.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was my experience too. The only part I'd add was it was my first time looking through a telescope in Denver at a quarter moon star party. And I walked out onto the observing field. You know, it's fun when you can remember before you understood something. And in this case, I'd never seen a telescope really, except maybe on TV, you know, that tripod little nautical telescope that all those expensive condos have on those TV shows. They all seem to have a telescope in their window for spying on their neighbors, I think. Or if they're, especially if they're on the beach. You know, it's all this shiny brass and everything. But what I saw when I walked out on that observing field, you remember like the circus used to have those big cannons that they shot people out of. That's what I saw. I went, what are all these circus cannons doing here? They're not shooting people out. Of course they were Dobbs. I didn't know any better. I queued up. There were people like you and me, working the telescopes. We're looking at M42, explaining what it was. I got up there, I looked through, and that's just the word I was looking for. It was a smudge. I was let down. I was disappointed. And yet, I, like many of you who may have had that experience, still go back and look at M42. What's changed? Well, of course, one thing that's changed is we've gotten much better at averted vision, right? And so we can see the details a little bit. But more seriously, we now understand what we're looking at. We're looking at a stellar nursery, the birthplace of stars. My point is, when we bring that understanding to the eyepiece, the visual experience gets that much richer. And we all know that because our careers as amateur astronomers have followed that path. And spectroscopy did the same thing for me. I now remember, oh yeah, there's going to be a hydrogen line and an oxygen line, and then read a little bit about why. Okay, let's move on. This is, again, a spectrum, two spectra of Uranus and Neptune. You can see very deep dips there. The spectra, you can see those bands there. And you can see a band there in the synthesized spectrum. So just like those bands of titanium oxide, complex molecules, this is the methane on these planets. This is also done by Torsten Hansen with a video camera. 30, 40 years ago, professional astronomers would have given their left leg, right? To be able to do this thing, to do this kind of thing. Okay, so in 1881, Henry Draper observed a comet. Now, if Hank can do it, hey, so can we. So here's a comet. There you can see that beautiful string of gems in the actual image captured. And here we can see the intensity plot. Those are the swan bands captured on, you can see at the bottom there, an 80 millimeter refractor. This was captured by, do I have that circled there? Yeah, there we go. Vikrant Agnihotri. He is a nuclear power plant engineer in Rajasthan in northwest India. He was a beginner when he did this. He's now an expert and a friend of mine now. It was fun for him to see, but here's something a little more recently. We can see the sodium line in the OAS done with a star analyzer on just the lens cap threads. That's what's called an objective grading on a DSLR. So, oh, there it is. These are new, these little call outs here, so I don't quite have them integrated into my spiel. So anybody who uses a C-clamp as part of their setup, that's my kind of ingenuity. Except if it was me, I'd crank it down too tight and I'd buckle the enclosure and the camera would break. But fortunately, Robin Leadbeater didn't do that, and he put a star analyzer, which he designed, by the way, on the nose piece, and he got this single frame of a meteor. So the meteor traveled that distance during the frame. There happened to be a bolide or outbreak there, outburst. But when he threw this into software, he could see these minerals. It's pretty amazing. It's rather sort of an esoteric group that does this. You've got to capture a spectrum first, and they're not quite that common as just stars. So we're not going to talk a lot about the sun. We've heard a lot about it 2 years ago, and we'll be hearing a lot more about it in 2 years. Except that we discovered helium on the sun, that yellow line first. We had no idea what it was until we discovered helium here on Earth with the same fingerprint spectrum about 30 years later. It's remarkable, remarkable science. So we can also, you can see that some stars, some novae have iron, some don't. This is done with a DSLR. I'm just trying to give you a flavor for the kinds of things you can do. Okay, a lot of you are familiar with Doppler shift and can probably explain it as well or better than I'm about to, but bear with me for those who aren't familiar with it. Doppler shift is the change in, for example, sound that happens when a train comes through the station with its whistle going, right? It's high, low. When it's coming towards you, it's high. When it's going away from you, it's low. Just like this little schematic here. Same thing happens to light. So if we were expecting a triplet like that triplet, I love that word, it's self-defining. If we were expecting that triplet there, and instead we found it there, we'd know that the object we were observing was moving away from us because of redshift. If we found it on the other side, that would be blue shift because it was moving towards us. Let's look at a great example of a supernova. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about supernovas. This particular type of supernova is called a type 1A. It's when you have a big star and then there's a white dwarf here, and some of the gas from the big star ends up on the white dwarf. I wouldn't use the verb spilling, but that's what this graphic used. It's not like a pitcher that you're pouring, although regardless, it's the gravity that's doing the work. But when you put gas on a hot object, you get an explosion. So let's look at an example in M101 of a supernova in that galaxy. There's a photograph of not this supernova, but the same type, this type 1A supernova. Can you see that looks like a sphere? That's a common image a lot of us have seen before. It does look like a sphere. So David Strange captured this spectrum with a 9-inch telescope. He stacked just what, 30 images that were 25 seconds long. So now you get into stacking. Most of the stuff I'm showing you up until this point hasn't required stacking, but these can be very dim. So, and there's the spectrum graph. Now, you know, we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, and we do. And so the giants have figured out that different types of supernovae have different signatures. This is two stars going around each other. Some supernovas are just, the core just collapses from lack of fuel. So, and they figured out, oh, and there's the dip there in the graph from a very weak dip visually there. They figured out that type 1A supernovas like this have a very deep dip right around 6,000. And that's silicon, ionized silicon. But these other core collapse supernovas don't have that dip. And so that's how David was able to, if you don't hit the escape key, you can actually see it. That's how David was able to identify this as a type 1A supernova. Now follow me here, it's just real quick. We recorded that wavelength there, 6150. We compared it to what silicon would look like, what color that dip would be at rest if Bunsen had burnt, say, beach sand. Doppler shift formula, I couldn't remember, Wikipedia helped. We now, on a backyard telescope, have calculated the blue shift, the expanding speed of that shell as it comes towards us. So that's pretty remarkable. It's fast, wow, number one. It's amazing we can do it on a backyard telescope, wow number two. And wow number three is, fortunately, we're far enough away. It, of course, will never reach us. You know, it's going to dissipate before it gets to us. So Adam Rees won the Nobel Prize with his team from research they did before the turn of the century. I know it feels like drinking from a fire hose. We'll be winding down in a minute. He used type 1A supernovae as standard candles. Somehow I think his equipment was a little more sophisticated than this. But bang for your buck, you know, $200, you can see spectra, you know, what would it be? Bang per buck. And the buck on his telescopes is millions of dollars. So he's got to get a lot of bang to have the same bang for buck that we get on this. How about the spectrum of a black hole? Now, a black hole, of course, doesn't emit light, but the matter spiraling around into it does, gets very hot. So David Hayworth in Portland, Oregon, south of me here in Seattle, captured that spectrum. I never have. There's the spectrum, two little dots where those arrows are. There they are blown up. There's the graph. This guy, Martin Schmidt, was 25 years old in the early 1960s, and he looked at this and he wanted to figure out what were those emission lines? What were those peaks? And he got really frustrated. And the reason I know this is there's a transcript of an interview with him where he tells the whole story. It's fascinating. It's linked to on my site. I can send you the link maybe in the chat or later by email. So he finally, he said, I'm going to go back to basics. First, I'm going to eliminate those lines being the hydrogen bomber lines. There's the image from my software that I asked you to keep in your mind's eye. And you'll notice those bomber lines, those reference lines that Bunsen measured the first time, don't really line up with those big peaks in the data. So he was able to say, well, I know these aren't the hydrogen bomber features. They must be something else, those peaks, except they were, and he figured it out. Look how much redshift has gone on there. And that redshift, using the Hubble constant, indicates that this object is 2 billion light years away. So we can calculate either its velocity or its distance. What's amazing to me is that this light, which came over 2 billion light years, that's a long ways away in time and distance. And yet it still has information in it that we can tease out with such simple gear. This is done with a modified security camera, no fancy S-Big cooled camera or any other cooled camera. Light aged really well. Humans don't age as well. There's Martin Schmidt a few years ago. Now, I really shouldn't show that because, you know, it's like throwing rocks living in a glass house. He's got a full head of hair. I'm jealous. Okay, 2 more examples and we're done. So far, we've been looking at, you know, hydrogen bomber features like these. So how wide are those features anyway? I'm just going to drop a line, there we go, it's squared up. That feature looks like, maybe it's, let's see, 20, 40, 60, 80, maybe 20 or 30 angstroms wide. So we're saying you can see 50 angstrom features. Suppose you want to have higher resolution and look at the details there. You can't just zoom in. That's like adding empty magnification when you're looking at the moon. At a certain point, the optics just isn't going to give you any more detail. Empty magnification. So what we do is we use one of those split spectrometers. Here's two spectra superimposed. One's the moon, the other's Vega. The moon isn't moving towards or away from us. I was noticing my camera. It looks like my camera's trying to change its exposure level when I do that. Hope you didn't get dizzy. So Vega is offset because it's got radial velocity that we've now measured. But we can't do it with a slitless grating because look, that difference there is like 0.67 angstroms. There's no way we could measure that on this scale. That's why you need a slit spectrometer. So final example of the night, I've got a visual aid. Sorry, I've gone a little bit longer. This is a rapidly spinning star, right? And this edge is coming towards you, and this edge is moving away from you. So the light coming at you here is blue shifted, Doppler shifted, and the light receding from you here is red shifted. So you've got red shift and blue shift, plus the light that's right here, the rotation isn't affecting the speed, the radial speed of that light. So if I can use the word speed. So what happens there? Well, some of the light that would normally be right here at the peak is going to be spread out, blue shifted and red shifted. Let's see what that looks like. That blue line is Altair, showing the broadening that happens because it's spinning very fast. This also requires a slit to do. What's amazing to me that, humanity has figured out how to measure these kinds of things on objects that are so distant. How do you get started? You need a grating. I've mentioned that earlier. Oops. You also need a camera, any sort of camera, as I mentioned, monocolor, video, still, cooled, not. You may need a spacer or two because this distance, although not critical like focus, needs to be in a certain range. There's a little calculator on our site, and I help lots of newcomers. They just send me their equipment on a contact form on the site, and I tell them whether they need an adapter or not. And you need the software. This is the software I wrote. This is some of the shareware that's out there that some people use. It's really powerful. It's got some challenges too. So remember I mentioned earlier that identifying what those dips were can be a little bit of a challenge, especially for a knuckle dragger like me. This book, the one that's on the right on your screen, I want to show you 2 pages from it. That's one that shows a spectrum with all sorts of call-outs. That could be helpful, but frankly, I don't know the significance of why nitrogen or helium, what does that mean? So this is such a cool book because he's got lots of text where he explains what you're seeing. So whether you're an armchair observer or whether this is something you want to do for yourself, there's tons of books out there. My software is free for 30 days. And the cool thing is, about 4 years ago, I taught a 1-hour workshop in person to the AVSO members. About 100 people attended at the SAS conference in California. And that workshop has been recorded. So this page has a link to the YouTube video and the software, and you can download the sample data. So you could tonight or tomorrow morning, you could download all of those, and you could attend that workshop. And at the end of that hour, it'd be a little longer because you'd stop the video and then try it and then start it again. But at the end of that hour, you'd have it in your bones what this was all about, how we go from a rainbow to a curve and how we tell where these dips are. So there's opportunities to do pro-am collaboration. The AVSO has a database now and are getting more and more involved as we go on, whether it was Arnie or Stella, who's now the director of the AVSO. They, as professional astronomers, understand the value of these kinds of things. I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here tonight, for smiling occasionally at my jokes, and also for doing the outreach that you all do. I figure it's paying it forward and paying it back, and you know how nourishing that can be. So keep it up, and thank you for doing that. And I'll be here, like I said, until you throw me out.
Thanks, Tom.
Sure.
Thank you. Very nice.
You're welcome.
Do we have questions for Tom? I have something that you can probably add to one of your slides, Tom.
Okay.
You were talking about the resolution of angstroms and then you have to go up to the higher instrument to read it, right? An analogy you could put in is all those movies where they keep saying enhance. enhance.
That's great.
And you zoom in, and it's that it's not going to work from a digital image perspective.
That's really, I will do that. Because all of us watch those and go, I know this isn't real. This can't be real. That's perfect. Yeah, and it's so fast too. It's just like that. They just zoom all the way in.
Mm-hmm.
So what else? Any other questions? See, Steve nodded off. His camera's off. His preview vid doesn't have his picture. He's gone. He'd heard this talk last month, so he was lulled to sleep by it.
Go ahead, Wolf.
Hello. I have a question about that picture you showed a while back of the periodic table with all the spectral lines. I
Yes.
noticed that you seem to have spectra for all the elements up to around, say, Einsteinium. Is this mean that the elements beyond plutonium have been detected in outer space through spectra?
That's a really good question. And for a minute, I thought you were that troublemaker Tony, but no, this is yet another guy who's giving me a hard time. Here's what he was referring to. Oh, I got to share my screen just so you see it. How do I do
Wolf
that?
always has great questions. So
Good. I'm glad. It is a good question. No, this is not astronomical data. Again, if you're curious, I scraped the NIST site, the government standards site, and then extracted the data, and then modified my software to pull the data in, display it, and create a bitmap, which I then sent to our graphics artist. So that's how this was created. So I don't know what's been detected in outer space. Maybe somebody else does. These are too short-lived, as many of you know, to really capture a spectra of. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Good. It's a little different than the one you've got there on the wall behind you, Tony. But you need one of these. This is for only direct sale I'll do. You really need one of these for your office when you go back in. I think your colleagues will be so impressed.
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, good. Anything else? Well, good. I'd like to thank you all again. It's been about an hour, and it's been fun for me. Like I said, I make changes every time I give this presentation. I'll tell you a quick story just to lull you all to sleep for good, and that was the Neil deGrasse Tyson story. I went down to the theater. I mean, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson told me when we were talking, but really I stalked him outside of a lecture hall here in Seattle about 6 years ago. And when he came out the stage door, I was standing there with about 24 people. So we queued up, and people were fawning all over him. And he was signing, programs, and they were talking to him about their favorite Cosmos series. And then I got up there and I had a manila folder, and I said, Dr. Tyson, we're capturing spectra with high school kids of quasars, and like he immediately switched into being a scientist. He was no longer interested in being a celebrity. And we talked for about 5 minutes. Meanwhile, I felt bad for the people behind me because they didn't have any conversation with him. They did get their autograph or his autograph on the programs, but he's just signing for them while he's talking to me. But he asked me a curious question. He said, what are you packing? And I'm thinking, what? What do you mean, what am I packing? I said, I beg your pardon? He said, what kind of aperture are you using? So I told him these are 8-inch telescopes. But so he asked, I had a manila folder with examples with kids highlighted doing this kind of thing, thinking I'd appeal to his educational side. And he said, can I have that? And I'm thinking, yeah. He said, is your business card in there? I went, yeah, ka-ching. Never heard from him again. So that was 6 years ago. 2 years ago, same deal. We're out on the street. This time there's a Jersey barrier keeping us from his limousine. And he sort of comes out, he does these meet and greets afterwards. So it's like 11:30 at night. And he comes out and he's sort of plodding to the car, and he sees us and he's beat. He says, got to go home, big day, long day. And so other people go, Dr. Tyson, just come over for a minute. I'm holding the poster now, which we've created, at arm's length, hanging over the Jersey barrier. So he walks over and he looks at it and he goes, wow, brilliant, brilliant. Why hasn't anybody done that before? Pause. And then he says, can I have one? And I'm thinking, yes, my brilliant wife had sent me down with a poster tube with a poster in it and my business card taped to it with special non-marring tape. Gave it to him. And Side story, the next day, coincidentally, I was going to go out with my lunch to a high school here. And I said, hey, doctor, on the spur of the moment, I said, Dr. Tyson, you know, I'm going out to an underprivileged school. I'm thinking I'm a home run, underprivileged school. Kids are underprivileged, Lunt telescope, outreach. Would you like to join me tomorrow? And he didn't say no. He like looked up, you know, for about, seemed like an eternity, 5 seconds. And he looked down and he said, my dance card is really full tomorrow. So if he'd said yes, the next question was going to be, will you pick me up in your limo or should I pick you up in my 1995, Legacy Outback? So again, I didn't hear bupkis from him, you know, nothing. So I said to my wife, well, let's suppose he calls, you know, and he says, Tom, I just want to tell you, you're doing fantastic work. I love the poster. How can I help you? What am I going to say? So my wife says, ask him if he knows educators. I go, no, that's not going to help. So what I would have said was, next time you're on a soundstage with video, give me 10 minutes and we'll just talk about spectroscopy. But he didn't call. Last part of the story, third part, standing out in the pouring rain in Seattle last fall, soaking wet with my wife. This will be the last time I do that, not because of the rain, but because it's not that it's demeaning, but it's weird. It's sort of like a peasant waiting for the king to come out of the palace and toss a coin at you, you know? I didn't like the feeling. So, but he came out and he was just beat, you know, and, you know, he didn't recognize me. I said, you know, I'm the periodic table of spectra guy. And he said, oh yeah, I've got that up in my office. And then he launched into, you know, his periodic table spiel, you know, he dropped the cassette in, he's going, the periodic table is how we, and I'm thinking, no, this is my talk. You know, I talk about the periodic table. I'm with you, Neil. Tell me something interesting. Let's talk. But I didn't say anything. So he carried on for a while. And that was it. That was the end of it. Now, I've sent him a couple emails. I got his email address through somebody who I can't name. And he's never responded. So he's a celebrity. And, you know, he doesn't have, if they even saw the email. I've got a metal poster that a printer sent me. At our request as a sample, because I wanted to sell the poster on metal. I don't have anything to do with it now. And I asked him if he wanted it, nothing. But anyway, he's a nice guy. And of course, he's done an enormous amount for our community and for public understanding. And when I mention this, when I tell a little bit about this story to astronomy professionals, I often get a sort of grimace because I'm not sure he's as respected by the professional community. Maybe some of you are there. Krista's saying that. Why do you think that is, Krista? You probably know a little bit more about why. And you could say you don't want to say.
I mean, I don't have a problem. But yeah, he's kind of more of the celebrity. His coworkers, they don't remember the last time he's walked into his own planetarium.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's caught the train. I think.
Yeah, I mean, smart guy, knows lots of stuff, but
yeah. He's not doing science. One person I asked, and they said he's just not giving back to the community that he came out of, you know. For me, my goal is just to get him to tweet a shout out about the poster to his 13 million followers. Instead of my wife and I sitting in front of the TV, posting a few posters into poster tubes now and then, it would be hiring a high school kid in a garage for him or her to stuff posters. 13 million followers. There's nobody, I don't even think, I won't mention he who should not be named. I don't think anybody has that number of followers. Regardless, enough storytelling. I've now chewed up another 7 minutes of your evening. Thank you all again. If there's anything I could ever do for you, just reach out to me. And thank you for everything you do to help your communities in this tough time.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
nice evening,
much.
everybody. Good night.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
My
Okay. How are we doing? Should we do,
Did Tom go away then?
Yes.
Oh, that's too bad. I wanted to share my screen and show something to him.
Oh.
Do you guys mind if I
No, I think we're looking to take a 5-minute break.
well then I'll wait until we're on break and do it then.
Okay. Let's be back at 15 minutes to 9 so we can stand up and stretch our legs.
I'll pause the recording in case anyone wants to share.
3.
I've
2.
lost my participants. Is that my fault or is that what
No,
happened?
I'm doing screen presentations, so you might not see them.
Oh, Oh, I was having so much fun seeing those happy faces.
You will see
I
them
thought I had
again.
touched something.
There's a stream of them at top. You can arrow through and watch as they're watching the presentation.
He has an iPad.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, I have an iPad. I'm crippled. I also have an iPad, though.
Well, last night on my phone, I could page through and look at images.
Well, I see Krista. That's the only person I can't bring up all of the other happy faces.
It may
Okay.
just show the person who's currently speaking.
But there are arrows at the top and the bottom, George. Hit the arrows and you'll see a scroll of pictures of participants.
Arrows. I don't have arrows at the top and the bottom.
Yeah, if you may need to touch your screen in order for them to show up.
Zoom. No, I don't see any other place. I'm looking around. I don't see anything.
With your finger, you can't, with your fingers, flop the screen up or down?
No. There's a thing at the top that says Zoom, but that might be something critical, correct? It has, I'll touch it, see what happens. Okay.
Just don't.
That's the data for the meeting.
Just don't hit anything that says hang up.
Don't hang up. Mine says leave, like in the tree.
Don't do that.
No. I was late getting in. I'm sorry about that. I don't know. I was doing something, and Jody said, "Hey, wait a minute. This is AstroPark Zoom night." I said, "Oh, I'll have to check it out." So I popped it up.
Okay. Well, glad you're with us, George. All right.
I'm glad I'm with you too.
We'll get
I'm
back
glad.
into our scheduled items. Do we have anyone use AstroPark in the last month?
Yeah, John, this is Bill Bond. I was down there once.
This is Tony Harrell. I was down there 3 times.
Ooh, cool.
Once with Bill.
So that's what you look like, not in the dark.
Yep.
Like water.
Cold.
So,
Ice.
so if he muted his video right now, you'd be like, "Oh, that's the guy I was talking to." Some important upcoming dates. Just a reminder, the officer elections are coming up next month. If you plan to run again, just let me know. A little, hey, I'll be running again. Awesome. I don't see Rodney tonight in the list.
Janine is here, however.
Janine,
Hi.
have you received anything yet?
No, I have not. You mean, are you talking about the awards thing?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, I'm still waiting. Another
Okay.
month has gone by and I'm still waiting on the outcome of my globular cluster log submission.
Was it submitted, Janine?
I snail mailed it to Rob. No,
Rodney.
Rodney.
Okay.
End of May. He must have gotten it by early June. At the last Zoom meeting, he admitted he had not sent it yet to the program coordinator. And I'm still waiting.
Okay.
I see that he is not here tonight, right?
I do not see him tonight, no. I'll have to send him a mail.
Yeah, I'm still waiting and I'm starting to get a little impatient. Partly this one is different because the rules for the program I think are a bit faulty in that they said that the minimum size telescope should be 8 inches, but then the types of description you're supposed to provide is as if you were looking through a 21-inch. You were supposed to describe some in details that would show that you know how the globular clusters were formed and so on. But with an 8-inch, all you get is a tiny little fluffy ball and you can't you can't even get the so-called Shapler, Shapley, whatever, Sawyer designation with an 8-inch. So I'm just curious to see if I got the award or not, and if I did not, it probably means they need to up their requirement for size of telescopes, or they need to have a more beginner's level where you do not have to have such detailed description of globular clusters that only show up as a tiny fluffy blob. I think Steve Skinner would agree with me on that.
Okay. Well, I will see if I can email him and ask him.
Muted.
Well, I have not emailed him yet myself. I could do that too.
Observing chair. Let me get the slides in the right place. I need to find so many different programs.
I have to go behind you.
George, I think you need to pluck your eyebrows. They're getting fuzzy.
Now, are you seeing the whole slide or the window with the slides in it?
The window with
The edit.
Okay. Here, you're going to see yourselves maybe for a second. How can you see it?
I can.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right. So for September, we have quite a few lineup of planets. And as at dusk, you can see Jupiter and Saturn. They're pretty obvious. The bright sparkle that you see in the south is Jupiter, and then you can see Saturn to the east. This little photo from Sky and Telescope shows the sky at dusk on the 24th and 25th of September. Jupiter and Saturn's relationship to Neptune is at opposition on September 11th. And you can see that little diagram with the Earth, the Sun, and Neptune. Mercury is still low on the horizon, and if you're trying to look for it, you should be able to see it close to Spica on the 21st and the 22nd of this month. Mars is rising closer to midnight, 2 hours after sunset, and in later September, close to 1 hour after sunset. And it'll be close to the moon on the 5th and 6th of September, so that's coming up this weekend. It'll be within half a degree of the moon. Venus is bright before sunrise in the morning sky. And some other key points, if you're an early bird, look to the east, and you should be able to see the zodiacal light. It's a cone-shaped light, and if you're trying to figure out where it is somewhere in the vicinity of Gemini and Cancer. We have autumn equinox on September 22nd. We just had the full moon earlier this week on the 2nd. It was at 12:22 a.m. Omaha time. And a new moon coming up on the 17th at 6 a.m. And just a little idea about sunrise and sunset. As you can see, as from the 1st to the 30th, sunrise is a little later and sunset is a little earlier. So our days are getting shorter now. And I think that's all I have for this month.
Great. Now I need to get out of this and get back to my other slides. Thank you, Sonali.
Thanks.
Outreach.
What happened to it?
Oh, you can't see it?
No, all I got an observing chair.
Oh, sorry. I moved the mouse and it jumped it.
There we are. Okay. I'll start, and then Steve, if you have anything. Okay.
Okay.
We had our little board meeting last night, and we all concurred that it's probably not a good idea to try to have any totally open public events yet. So we basically canceled the second Tuesday thing out at Zarinsky. I think I'd already marked it on the calendar, canceled for a while back. But anyway, I had mentioned that at the board meeting and also in my email to the board members and a few others that we had tentatively on the schedule an event down at Slattery's Vintage Estates, which was planned way last February. There's several of you I know have been down there and thoroughly enjoy going down there. Talked to Barb Slattery today, and she's still interested in possibly doing something, but she said she would have to beg off on September 19th because they think they're going to have a small wedding party down there, and she's desperate for business. So obviously, yeah, she would rather have some paying customers, even though the folks that come down to the public are they do buy wine and whatever when we're there. But anyway, she said they're very cautious, safety conscious. Everyone inside anywhere has to have a mask on, and or if you're in a group closer than 6 feet, as the rules that we all know about. Just to let you know, I mentioned it to the board last night. We had another semi-private event that I and Eric and Bill Bond participated in last Saturday at Lawrenson. Those of you that have been there before, they take us out to the Rose Garden, and it's back about a quarter mile into the area, and so they jumped in their little golf carts, and I and Eric and Bill, we drove back there and set up our equipment, and then oh geez, what was it? It was almost 9:30, I think, before the tram came out with about 20 people on it. There again, they all had their masks on, even riding in the tram that they came out in. But they were all very, very good people. Asked a lot of questions. There again, when anyone was close to our telescopes, they had their masks on, and I think all in all it went very well. So we'll see. I'll check with Barb. She hadn't sealed the deal with the folks down, or I mean the wedding thing down there on the 19th. But the other date that could be a possible date for her would be October 17th. That's like the third Saturday of October. So we'll see how it goes. And there again, I'm only saying if you don't feel ever obligated unless you are comfortable doing it. And we would potentially have another one down at Lawrenson on the last Saturday of this month, the 26th. As far as Mahoney goes, Eric and I are working and looking on that. That is that same weekend, although it would be Friday night if we would have it. I don't think Mahoney has opened up as much as maybe some people had thought. So they may not even want any kind of public event. When I'm talking public, I mean anybody could show up, and we have no control whether they're wearing masks or anything. So that's why I'm advocating we avoid those type of environments. So if anybody has any other thoughts and questions, pipe up, or if you want to speak privately with me, that would be fine too. So that's about the sum of any kind of outreach. And as I mentioned last, all the events down at the 4-H Center with the Papillion La Vista schools have been canceled for sure this year. So Steve, I don't know if you had anything else. I mean, that's outreach. We can get into the in-reach or whatever things we might want to do intra-club as we move on here. So,
well, the only thing I would say is that my wife and I are moving away from the independent living spot where we live. I've been really, really super hesitant to participate in any outreach for obvious reasons. But we're going to be moving back to our home. It'll just be the two of us. And so I'm very careful. I got a spray bottle of alcohol and I use it liberally when I go someplace. And so I feel comfortable outreaching to people who email us and are just looking for a little bit of help. And so if on a one-to-one basis, I've done a little bit of outreach, I guess you'd say that way. And that's probably what I will continue to do and try to avoid big groups. So I guess I'm unfolding a little bit into outreach.
Questions, comments?
No, I was just going to say that's a good idea that Steve had. If someone emails us and arranges something, that's far different from throwing an invitation out to the world in general. Yep. And it gives us a chance to control and ask people to say, wear a mask before you come over to my telescope, please, etc.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a virtual opportunity coming up next Friday if you guys want to experiment. For those of you who are connected up with their software and their computers, I've got a Girl Scout group between 8 and 10 next Friday night. And if you wanted to jump on to show us what you can see in your telescope, that would be wonderful anytime during that block. If you email me, I can send you that Zoom link and give you a little bit more detail. So I put that in the chat. So that's next Friday from 8 to 10. I'll do a Zoom program for Girl Scouts. But I'm looking for some live imagery people if you want to hop on.
Yeah, Krista, we've already talked. I'll try to help if weather cooperates.
Yeah, if weather cooperates, but I didn't know if anyone else is doing that kind of stuff too.
Krista, what kind of images are you interested in showing?
Anything that your telescope can bring up that you want to show us. These are usually young girls. The average age is usually between 8 and 10 or 12. Some of them are a little bit younger, some are a little bit older. So even the moon, but moon won't be visible, but Jupiter will be, Saturn will be, any other easy find object, just to show the girls, what it looks like in a telescope, since we can't do a face-to-face type event for them.
It's not any kind of live view. It would be images.
It could be images. It could be live view. If it's cloudy, I plan on snagging images. I'll probably use some Discord images and credit the photographer. Okay. But yeah, if you have still images, but if you wanted to show, like John has done in the past, show his moon processing live stuff, we could do that too. I mean, I'll have plenty of other information if no one can join or if it's cloudy, but I thought that would be a great opportunity to do some outreach, but virtually.
I'll try. Go ahead, John.
Sorry. Go ahead and finish. I was going to jump subject.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like most of us, you have to be tied to a good electricity source. So I'd have to be in my driveway. But Jupiter, Saturn, double stars. I've looked at Alberio, Mizar, Alcor, things like that. Can easily be captured within. Yeah,
the girls love to see just anything and everything. They just think it's amazing.
Now, we did mention about the bingo cards, and we think we have something that's working. So if you want a bingo card, we can certainly produce them. They'll be a little scrambled every time we generate a new one, so not all cards will be the same. We have a number of objects on them, and I will probably post some examples up on Discord, or you can email me, and I can send them to you as well. If you're looking for something to look for, sometimes the lists of things to look at can be a challenge, so I'm trying to add a little bit of fun into that.
Did you share that in the Stella maybe, or on Facebook or Discord, or?
I will put it on Discord. I don't have Facebook, but maybe you could share it, Kim.
Yes, if you make it available, I can by email. I'll definitely share it on Facebook.
Okay. Right now, it's just in a spreadsheet, and if you make a change to the spreadsheet, it generates a new card. So it's fairly simple in a way to make a new card. So obviously, the more objects you put on the list, the less duplicates you get that show up on the card because it's a random generator. So telescope and binocular loan program.
Can I interrupt before we go to telescope? I'd like to thank Kim for pointing out that my little diagram for the opposition was wrong in the order. I did send John a corrected slide, but I did this late at night, and when I imported the photos in the slide, I just placed them in the order I imported them and did not move them around. So what it showed in the slide was actually, you're right, a superior conjunction and not an opposition.
Okay, thank you. Stafford. You're muted.
Not a great deal of activity, but some. The 6-inch silver Dobsonian came back this past month, and the 8-inch Orion went right back out. 6-inch silver Dobsonian probably will not be available for too long because I have a request for it. And this afternoon, the club got a another unit. If you recall some conversations we've had, John Johnson and myself, he inherited a 6-inch in telescope. Let's see if I can. I've never tried this before, but if we look over in the back there, you can see this is it. As mentioned earlier, this is a nearly brand new unit, and it has the push-to setting circles, which I still have to learn a little bit about how to properly work before I release it into the wild. But I think this is going to be a pretty nice scope once we get the feel for it and get people using it, and it's consistent with the discussions we've been having about getting some more automated types of equipment here. So there you have it, and I'm kind of looking forward to trying it before going too much further with it myself. So that's about it.
Thank you, Stafford. So I saw some chat with Nicholas talking about looking at a 10-inch Dobsonian. So our loan program would certainly help you experience it, to see what it's about, how it works, how it goes together, and the operation of it before you decide to buy your own. So it can kind of be a good decision maker for that. As you can see, there are many of them checked out. So it is a fairly popular program. Let's see.
I had a question, actually.
Yeah.
So this is my first time in one of these meetings with you guys, so thank you for all the awesome information, first of all. I ended up showing up at UNO in the classroom and no one was there, so.
Oh.
So I saw the joining fee was $25.
Yes. Are you a student?
Well, I just graduated, actually.
Ah.
So I was about a year ago, but not anymore. Is that like a monthly fee, or is it a one-time thing,
No.
or how does that?
It's yearly.
Okay, so $25 for the whole year then, and that would give me access to be able to rent out and try other new telescopes then.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
Perfect.
we borrow them. We don't rent them per se.
Yeah, it's just a borrow.
Oh, okay, perfect. And then I don't want to take up too much of the time, but who could I talk to about getting more information on that?
About the checkout, you mean?
Yeah, and like just who I would pay and how I could get, more information on just borrowing a telescope.
I'm the one you want to talk to.
Okay. And who are you again, sir? I'm sorry.
Stafford Pellis.
Matthew Paulus?
Stafford Pellis.
Stafford Paul. Okay.
Yep, he should be in the list. It should say Stafford.
Okay, I'll shoot you a private message and maybe send you my cell phone number or something.
On the
that's the best way to do it.
On the website, there's the Stella archives, and if you open the most recent Stella, there should be the list of all the officers.
Okay.
And I think that's clickable for emails as well if you click on their name.
Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, I'll definitely look more into that, and I look forward to working with y'all more. I'm actually out on my patio trying to get some pictures of Saturn right now.
Haha. Well, we're gonna ask you to share later.
Okay, I got some cool time lapse footage of the moon the other night. I'll have to share. It's kind of cool.
Okay. So the treasurer is Mike Gallagher. He's actually in on tonight, and in the Stella there should be a membership form in the back, or
Okay.
you can. I think there's also a link on the website, but one or the
Perfect.
other.
Cool. Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys. I'm just gonna kind of sit and listen.
Okay.
I'm actually surprised you were able to get into UNO. The way they've
Yeah,
accessed the buildings, it's usually locked now.
I know. Yeah, I was surprised I was getting in, and there was another person there, and I was like, "Is this where the astronomy club meets?" He's like, "I don't know. This is my first time." So when you guys sent me the link, I ended up forwarding it to him too. So.
Get my Cody.
So we're in the business meeting portion. I need to find the meeting minutes, and for some reason that's not clicking. So, okay. Do you want me to summarize the meeting minutes, or should we say as it appears in the Stella? One or the other. Anybody got any preference?
As it appears.
As it appears? Okay. Does anybody know of any corrections or addition to the minutes as it appears in the Stella? I'll make that bigger. There weren't any awards given. We talked about Perseids. The Astro Park survey is still available. We have over 22 entries on that now. We talked about the telescope loan program, the tool time. We had the program. Wonderful program by Doug Kalpa. And we had our business meeting, treasure info. I read the minutes. And the vice president talked about things. And then we had a lot of old business and new business. So do we have a motion to accept the minutes as they appear in the Stella?
I motion to accept them. This is Tom Wilson.
I'll second Cleet Baker.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the minutes as they appeared in the Stella. All those in favor say aye.
I'm unmuting everybody.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Good. That carries. I didn't have my piece of wood there, but that's all right. Treasurer's report.
Not very much activity in August, except that we received $500 in dues, including from 3 new members. And there was a $50 cash donation from one of our members. $9 from Amazon Smile, total of $559 total income. There were no bills last month, so there were no expenditures. The account balance at the end of the month was 12340.31. We have the insurance for the club expires the 25th, I believe, of September. Eric Balcom was in contact with me very promptly today, and we talked over. He talked over with me what some options are, and that expect that he will get a proposal from another insurance company service. He thinks it may be the Omaha Insurance Services to give us a quote. So we should be okay with having continuing insurance. And I would say that's all of the business.
Mike, can I say thank you for getting that letter in the mail and offering to help that person whose telescope was needed some.
Oh yes, we got one piece of correspondence from a gentleman who has a 90 millimeter f11 refractor that apparently his kids have given it a hard time in the last number of years, and it may be missing some parts and may not work in other ways. And he was wondering about sending it back to Celestron, but I offered to look it over. I haven't heard back from that yet, though. I did send an email. And I also said if he didn't want somebody else to do it, I could probably find somebody else in the club that would be glad to help him too.
Well, thank you for offering that to him. It was a really nice written letter, all typed up on a piece of paper and sent through the mail. I don't think we have our vice president here tonight. So our folks that went down to Astro Park, how did it look?
Good.
It looks better than the pictures.
Good. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I didn't really see anything, John. I got down there a little bit late. It was still fairly dark by the time I got there, so it's still there.
Well, you didn't like drive off into a ditch, so that didn't get any bigger.
John?
Yes, sir.
George Allen here. Would you like to know the coordinates for Astro Park and include it in some of the literature?
I have it on the, I think it's in the welcome letter that goes to new members. And I have it written down as well.
What is it?
Well, it's off the top of my head, but
well, if it's on top of your head, you couldn't see it anyway.
We could on
there's that
yours,
rusty
George.
post. Pardon?
We could see it on your head, George.
You could if it was there. But it isn't. I have my light on. I can turn my light off up there if it's blinding you. Just my head shining.
Ta-da!
I do have something constructive to say, however. In another club that I participate in light of the COVID-19, we have switched to having meetings once a month. Well, no, actually, we're having them every Saturday at a public park. In this case, it's Lake Manawa, a pavilion where they have benches and tables and a ceiling over the top and all of that, concrete. And we meet there in the open air. And our membership has turned up. We have more people at that one than we do when we have them at the regular office. It's working out very well.
I'm going to go down and try to get some photos real quick.
All right.
How about you? Saturn moved.
So, thank you for the info, George. Are you talking like 50 people, 100 people? What?
We're having about 50, and we normally have about 30 at a meeting. There's a lot of people turn out, and at Manawa, for instance, there's a number of different pavilions, and we have them at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. There's none of the revelers there that normally are associated with public parks. So we have the place all to ourselves. And the caretaker just loves it because we come in, we clean up when we leave, and we're able to spread out. In fact, most people don't even get under they stand around in groups on the grass, and in that particular case, it's amateur radio, and they actually set up some amateur radio portable equipment and use it during the meeting, and it's been wildly successful in view of this. The word virtual used to be attractive to me. It no longer is. I see nothing fun about virtual. It's 40 degrees, 51 minutes north, 96 degrees, 6 minutes west. That'll get you on the 4 acres. And there's something else that I don't know how many people are aware of that might want to try this. When we travel on the interstate on long trips in the summertime, we stop at at various rest stops along the interstate, and they have concrete tables there, and you set out, and there's other people around. And I have found out that if we stop at a concrete table and get our little thermos jug and our lunchbox out, I can set up a quest star on that concrete table and draw a crowd inside of 10 minutes. And I don't know how much good it does, but talk about sporadic outreach. Then people come from all over. What are you doing over here? What is that? Is that fireworks? Are you going to shoot a rocket in the air? What are you going to do? Oh, I'm just looking at the sun. So you have a look at the sun and see the sunspot. At any rate, it's an interesting thing to do on a long trip on the interstate. Set a telescope. Any kind of a telescope would work. Set a telescope up out in plain view and start playing with it, looking at the sun. And it seems to draw a crowd quickly. That's about all I have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Old business. So the park survey is still out there. We've got some more entries on it. That is now in the Stella, so members can find it there. There was discussion on the ground school. I think that's a placeholder currently. We discussed the videos on the OAS website. I'm going to attempt to produce a video here in the next week on having a checklist. We've all forgotten something at home, so I thought I'd try to tackle the idea of making a checklist as a way to spur on other videos that we can put on the website for other things. If you have a topic that you think would make an interesting video, you can go ahead and say it now and I'll write it onto a list.
I would like to ask, what is ground school?
It was a way to educate people on how to use their telescopes that they may have bought.
Aha. Okay. Has it actually been done and within its success?
It has not been implemented as of yet.
We have tried this in the past and the results were sorted. And all I can say is good luck. If you make an attempt, you might make it work.
Well, that's all we can do is try to make an attempt and see what we can do.
Mm-hmm. What are kind of the plans for that? I mean, will it be held at any particular place or any, exactly how is it supposed to work?
I think Steve had originally talked about it.
George, what I was interested in trying to do, and a lot of this was just because of the COVID virus before it got really serious and everyone just kind of stayed home. But I think to try to provide on a Saturday morning, let's say, a chance for people to take their telescopes out and make sure that all the bugs were out. Make sure that if they have a finder scope, it was really finding. To try to use that as an opportunity to try different lenses. As long as you're going to try to line your telescope up with a finder, try some lenses. I thought also, and probably a lot of you have done this, but to be able to have the challenge to try to find, if it happens to be work out right, to try to find Saturn or more likely Jupiter in the full daylight sky. I know when I finally got that done and saw Jupiter in the afternoon, I was just a little astounded. So there are some things that you could do. We talked also about trying to provide people who would assist with aligning the mirrors on a telescope. So those are some of the ideas. I had proposed that maybe this could be a Saturday morning event for an hour, 2 hours maybe at the most. So that's all that I know that we have. It was a good idea waiting for something to happen, and it was kind of shut down by the virus.
I'm just keeping it on old business because I don't want to lose track of it. It's
Yeah,
just
I
a
think
place mark for
at the
us.
last meeting, I think Nina said that she was interested in not having it taken off the table, but to keep the idea around.
What location was suggested?
Zarinsky Park, Lake Zarinsky. And that was primarily just because we're used to meeting there for outreach.
Okay.
And also that there's a good horizon there, but in the distance there are plenty of objects to use your finder scope to make sure it's lined up properly.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying the idea is to invite people to come in person and bring their own telescopes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think part of that, Kim, was the idea that I still think about this. I remember asking one time when we could still meet face to face, how many people had a telescope, and most of the audience indicated that they had a telescope, but I could probably list on both hands the number of people who would show up with their telescopes at outreach positions. And I know it might be people just are not interested in that aspect, of the outreach aspect of it. But it made me wonder why there were so many hands raised from people who had telescopes who said that, and so little participation with the telescope. So one of the thoughts was, well, maybe it's just collecting cobwebs in the corner. People haven't used it in a long time, and maybe they're just unsure how to proceed. So let's do the rudimentary thing. Let's make sure that the finder scope is really operating properly and the eyepieces are cleaned up and operating properly. If there are more and more people all the time who have purchased telescopes, for them, those would be valuable exercises as well.
Okay, good idea.
I think what we need mostly is just to have enough confidence to attach the OAS name to an event where there are more than 10 people. Yeah.
I would like to add at this point that we're downsizing. I have about 20 telescopes ranging from 2 inches to 14 inches. They are all for sale. All of them except maybe 1 or 2. I don't want to make a list. It'd be too laborsome to do that. I have all sorts of telescopes, and I don't need them.
They'll contact you outside the meeting.
Yeah, thanks
Pardon?
for sharing that, George.
So they'll contact you.
If they'll contact me with their needs, I'll tell them what I have that is close to that.
How should they contact you?
402-690-9245.
Thank you.
Can you repeat that? I can put it in the chat.
That would be great. I would love it in the chat. I'm going to call you George.
George, repeat your number.
402-690-9245. And I was kind of looking forward to actually having meetings again. I have at least 2, maybe 3 pair of brand new binoculars that I planned on giving away at meetings, door prizes or something. Bill's got, I gave one to Bill about the time the COVID thing hit. He still got it. Brand new pair, $750 or $1050, still in the wrappings. And I said, take this and do a door prize with it. We haven't had a meeting. So it's been all summer long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also got some books that you gave me, George, and I think we're wanting to do that at a club star party.
Yeah, I've got books you can't believe, like 60 Years of Sky and Telescope. I'd hate to throw them in the trash can. I'd like to sell them for a few bucks. Sky and Telescope goes, I got a few all the way back to 1939. I wasn't alive then, of course, but close to it. But I've got all of the Sky and Telescopes, I think, from about 1970 or something to the present. They're taking up space.
I know.
Your wife's
I know that.
making you sell them. Let's be honest.
What was that?
I said your wife's making you sell them. Let's be honest.
That's part of it. You got that correct. Yeah, and I got other things too. I got sky charts and maps of all sorts. You name it, I got it, astronomy wise. And I'm going to have to get rid of all of it. We're going to start living in a mobile home or something.
Right. There was a discussion earlier this summer about the workday. We did one workday in July, and there was the proposal to do another workday this fall. Does anybody have any ideas on what day that should be? Late September, early October?
John, the best time I think would be around a full moon, so you're not going to wear anybody out if it's a new moon who might want to observe that night.
Okay. So we got the 17th, so 1, 2, so maybe somewhere around October 3rd. That's close to it. It's a Saturday.
Yeah, that'd probably be a real good day.
Stay up late after the meeting. Try to drive down there Saturday morning.
That works.
Oh. We used to stay down there 3 days at a time, or at least 2 days and 2 nights.
All right. Purchase a 6-inch Nexstar with battery pack. This is carried over from last month. We started the discussion but did not finish the discussion.
Good evening, K0SWI.
John, if you want that spreadsheet posted, just let me share the screen.
Yep.
It's up to you.
I pulled myself out, so you can go ahead and.
All right. Of course. I'm still recovering. Oh, man. I'm still recovering from this crash. Let's see if I can get this up for you and share it. I'm sorry. First of all, I'll have to find the darn thing. Yeah.
Do you want me to give you a moment and come back to it?
I think I'm there.
Okay.
I'm going to have to go back out of the share, I think, for a moment. Can I just go ahead and close the window? I did. I suppose now I'm in real trouble.
No, we can still hear you.
Okay.
So you've remained connected.
Yep. Well, that's good. All right. I think we want to go there. All right. There it is. So I don't know. Are you going to explain the item or Pellet or Stafford or how? I don't know how you want to proceed.
Well, the discussion we had last night was talking about specifically around having a second go-to system in the library of telescopes that get loaned out. And it was discussed that there should be at least a dew shield because it's an SCT, and having an eyepiece filter kit, a power supply, and a carrying case to keep it properly padded. And that's where we came up to these numbers. Stafford.
Yeah, as I interpret it, we're trying to kind of narrow down what the final shopping list would be out of this set of possibilities here.
There was some question that was raised about the 2-inch eyepieces and the size of the mirror and the size of the opening in the back. And I did some checking on that. Stafford, I think I sent those numbers to you. You might
Yeah,
not.
you did, and it's kind of a sense of preference, I guess. They would probably work just by value of, or I should say, a 2-inch would probably work by the number or by the value of the size of openings and diagonals that, not diagonals, secondaries that you had given me. But considering that it's a loaner system, I think we're going to get a little bit better value out of the 1 1/4 eyepieces.
Sure.
And then the other thing, just which has nothing to do with optics, but if they get lost, they're a bit more economical to replace.
Valid point. I did change the power tank to the one that's more comparable to the lead acid power tank. These two battery systems are approximately equal in terms of energy output. One is lithium chemistry, one is lead oxide chemistry.
Yeah, I'm fully with you on the for a $6 difference. I think you're probably gonna get a better performing battery out in this case.
Yeah.
Discussion from the membership? Any questions?
This is for the loan program, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
No. Oh, I thought you told if you want, you can download the Princess.
So it'll just be like the little bit bigger version than the SE4 that we got earlier last year.
Everyone does it. I just don't know what the title looks like. Oh. Ah. It's the purple one. The Piper.
Is somebody talking?
Yeah,
I got it.
Oh. No, I think this is a great addition to our loan program. I'm excited about it.
It all looks good to me.
Mike.
Someone has experience with it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just a smaller size than what Steve has. The controls work just the same as mine. Denali's.
It's the next step in size, bigger than the 4-inch that Janine donated to the loan program.
Yeah. No, it was a very useful telescope, I'm sure.
The planetarium has 2 5-inch that we use for outreach a lot. We got on a space grant, but I would definitely agree with a lot of people. The 2-inch eyepieces for this size of a telescope is not. It wouldn't work for the 5-inch.
Someone in, I don't know if it was in the last meeting or last night's board meeting, have raised a question with respect to 2-inch eyepieces. I don't know this one myself, but does the area between the back of the telescope and the base of the mount give enough room for a 2-inch eyepiece to work in something like a 5 or 6-inch scope?
Not for the 5. I measured it today.
Because that would be a concern to me if you're trying to shoehorn a 2-inch eyepiece into.
Same thing for the secondary mirror. That's only about 1.5 inches max.
You'd be getting close to hitting the mount.
Yeah.
Or actually hitting it, yeah.
I have the 8-inch and I have 2-inch eyepieces. And the reason I was concerned about it is I also have the Wi-Fi dongle, and it just snaps into the base of the mount, but it sticks up so that if you try to move the telescope to zenith, it would sort of decapitate the Wi-Fi dongle. And so I had to work around for that. I had a small little cable, real like a 4-inch cable, and so the dongle dangles. And I found also that you can slide the the dovetail mount far enough ahead and fix it in place so that the whole arrangement, the 2-inch diagonal and the eyepiece, it clears. I look with that arrangement, I look at zenith all the time. I don't even think about it anymore. It just works. But it takes a little workaround.
Are these retail prices or are they, quote, our prices from
These are
Celestron?
retail prices, and this $799 price for the Celestron telescope, the tripod, the holder, the mount, the finder, the hand controller, the 1.25 diagonal, a 20 millimeter plusle, and let's see, there's also, I think, a filter, a moon filter. Anyway, that grouping right there, if you look at all of the places where you could buy this telescope, it's always the same price, $799. There was some comment about whether or not, because we're a club, there would be a club price available at some of these telescope outlets. And that,
or directly from Celestron, perhaps.
Well, that's a strange thing, Cleet. Celestron sees themselves as a manufacturer. They don't try to sell to you directly. If you make an order for equipment to Celestron, they'll take your order and farm it out to their
dealer network.
The dealer network, and have someone and pick it up from there. But because of the brokenness of the supply chains, because of the COVID virus, since June, Celestron has said, okay, you want this equipment, you can buy it directly from us. I think it was an attempt to give the broken supply chain business a little bit, to give the official dealerships a little bit of latitude because the supply was uncertain. I think that all of these things are available. You might have to wait a little bit on the Celestron SE6 itself. I'm not sure.
So you're looking for a motion to go ahead and make this purchase?
Mm-hmm.
I think so at this point. I would say also that all of this was discussed in great detail by the executive board. So it's not as though this is being sprung on everybody. And I would invite other members of the executive board to make whatever comment they want to. And if you have comments, the rest of you, to be sure that you direct them. We'll get them answered.
A moment ago, there was discussion about the 2-inch eyepiece and how it wouldn't work
Yes.
necessarily on this. And yet it is listed on the prices, unless, in one column it's listed. So I guess what is the actual purchasing that's going on here?
Well, over here for the quantity, if I make the 2-inch eyepiece from a 0 to a 1, you'll see that reflected in the price. So these are
got it.
These are just possibilities. And if there's a 0, it means that price is out of the sum.
Kind of a what if spreadsheet more than.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah.
As I see it right now, I think our next obligation is to agree on what we're going to acquire here, and then say this is the final proposed direction. But these numbers are here for all of us to look at and say, well, if we want one from column A or column B, that's good. And then look at see the possibilities that work with this, and then we decide on the final direction and propose it to the rest of the board for the next step.
John, this is Bill Bond. I would like to make a motion that we purchase this telescope as described with part quantities and everything for a total of $1279.85.
Right. There is a motion on the floor to go ahead and purchase this telescope with the items listed at quantity 1 at those prices. Well, there might be a little bit of float. By Bill Bond. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Kim?
I'm curious what is in the 1 1/4 eyepiece and filter kit. How many eyepieces does that buy us, and what
Sure.
are the sizes?
I'm gonna that's another view here, if I can if I can get over there.
You're going to stretch that technology tonight there, Steve.
Oh, I'll tell you, I had this just working like a Hummer until my thing froze up. So let's see. Okay, well, another one. Let's try this.
In the meantime, Steve, I'll give you, last year or actually I should say earlier this year, we were looking at some eyepiece combinations to support the Nebraska Star Party scope. And if this is the set that I'm thinking of, it has something like a 26 and a 17 millimeter eyepiece, then it jumps down to like a 10 and a 7. It's kind of an odd combination.
Here it is,
and
right
then
here.
Filters, I think there was a moon filter with a couple of like 2 or 3 additional colors on it. I don't remember what exactly they are.
Here it is, right here. So here are 5 eyepieces and a Barlow. So the eyepieces.
No, we're still seeing your original spreadsheet.
According to the description on the website, it includes 14 accessories. You'll get 5 quality Plossl eyepieces, a 2X Barlow, 6 colored filters, a moon filter, a foam-filled aluminum carrying case with extra room to grow. They are a 3 millimeter, a 4, a 6, a 6.5, an 8, an 8.5, 13, 16, 17, and 32 millimeter. I'm sorry. What? 5 eyepieces in Barlow. Oh, okay. That's what it's doing.
That's with the Barlow, obviously.
Yeah, okay. They didn't write that until the bottom.
Yeah.
So 5 eyepieces.
I think another, this is a very minor item in terms of the cost, but, and we talked about this some the other day, I think all our telescopes that we loan should really have a moon filter. It goes without saying that whoever borrows a telescope is going to try to look at the moon. And so we all know what problems can happen there, especially if it's a full moon, even a quarter moon. So this particular filter set does include a moon filter.
That's excellent.
I will put it in the chat. 32, 17, 13, 8, and 6 millimeter Plossls.
That sounds excellent.
Oh, this is from Celestron, right?
Yes.
It's from Celestron.
Yep. That's the site I'm pulling it from.
Okay, could I stop the share and show the share again?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let me do that. And then I'm going to share my screen again. But this time I'm going to do that. And then I think you can see it.
Yep, that's the one I was reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one I was looking at, what is an Orion? It was a slightly different set of pieces.
And they have the eyepiece list lower down on the page.
The other part about this that I think is important is that this is equipment that we are going to loan. And as long as there is a reasonable, nice, dedicated space to it, I think we can expect that it's prepared for well. It's when there's a jury rig container for equipment like this that it gets damaged, in my view. Maybe Stafford could comment on that.
I've been trying to case things where I can since I've been doing this.
Yeah.
I think this is a wise way to release the pieces and parts to users and keep them safely housed.
Yeah.
Plus, I don't know how it works for other people, but for me, with a case, it also forces me to inventory a little bit more carefully as I'm completing something. So.
Okay. A motion has been made by Bill Bond and seconded by Kim Moss Allen for the purchase of a Celestron 6-inch SE with the accessories included therein on the spreadsheet. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Well, motion carries. Look at that.
Good deal.
Yes.
Make a nice addition.
Let me get back to. All right. And finally, we had new business. So, time-wise, we've only got 5 minutes left. If I had to choose one, I'll mention the Misrule Junior Telescope. There was a email that we got about Alcon Junior wanting to do. They want to do a telescope build project for youth, and they are inquiring about if our organization would contribute to that program. We had discussed this at length last night, and the discussion tended towards if we're contributing to a program for youth, that's great, but if it's not advantaging the youth in our area, is it a wise use of club funds for said program? I don't know if, John, you had any thoughts on that as we got the email together. And
Yeah, I don't know right at this instant enough about where the whole concept is going right now. I'm tending to lean towards the if we would really jump on something, want to do it for youth in our area or try to promote the other program that is basically astronomical league wide is what they call the library loan telescope program, and we've talked about that at great lengths too. That might be more to our liking or fulfill our goals to try to get more young people involved with astronomy than helping contribute to what's happening at the Alcon. I don't think we have to make any kind of decisions right now. I'll try to find out just where it's at. As all of you know, they were trying to have it even this past summer at what would have been Alcon 2020, but due to COVID that was canceled and everything postponed to next year. So we got some time to find out just where the program is at.
I don't think there was enough information in the email.
No, there wasn't. It was just kind of a challenge from another club in the mid-states region that they were going to do it, and they thought, hey, that ought to be something every club ought to do. But I'm not on board with that yet.
Well,
John?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, which one?
George Allen. Can you give me a synopsis of the Misrule Junior Telescope Program? Where is it going to be located? What would it be? And who would administer it?
Okay. You want me to do it?
Actually, I think we ought to table that for this month, and because of the time, and look at it in more thorough view next month, and push more to get somebody to volunteer to be a youth program coordinator.
True. I may have to talk about that next month as well. It's pretty close to 10. We've got about a minute left. Just as a tease, we had a discussion about possibly having an appointed chair that would head up a youth program for young people to get them interested in astronomy, whether it be an after-school program or a Saturday program, something we can start on video or whatever, just to generate interest and serve those young kids. If you look at everybody here in Zoom, not a
We're
lot of young
old.
kids, and they may not be able to be in these videos. So, something tailored to them that they can be together and that they can do together and experience. It doesn't have to be big subjects. So, something that might be interesting, something to think about. Then we
Could
can
I
discuss
remind
more.
you that that the club had a youth program for many, many years, and it was very vibrant, but it disappeared. It morphed into outreach. So are we being duplicating of existing programs with a youth program coordinator? Wouldn't that fall under outreach?
What we talked about was trying to get some an actual gung ho youth to and yours us old guys probably have lost touch what would really excite a young person. So the idea was, can we find someone younger, maybe under 20 or in the early, that can identify, has the social media skills to help. I mean, I can sit back and throw out ideas, but I don't know if they're going to fly or not with what's going on with the young folks now. I mean, everything's centered around one of these crazy things. So I don't know. I don't know. You're right, George. You're perfectly right. And that's what, what I was trying to do 20 years ago. But, I don't have the magic touch to figure out what it takes. We've tried to instill that interest in youth over the years, doing our things out at the 4-H camp. It's never added to our roles that I've ever seen. I've run across a lot of people in my walk of life that have been part of that and always remind me and are always excited. Oh, that was so much fun. We learned so much out there. But where they go once they get into high school and on into young adulthood, I don't know. Anybody know? I'm open to any and all thoughts.
I don't think it would dilute outreach. I think that it would work in tandem, but could have the impact towards those young people. They could be a mentor to them as well, and trying to foster that connectivity that rolls up into outreach as well.
Well, I'm going to agree with Louis that we need to table this for another meeting and actually give this more time than the last 3 minutes of our meeting.
Yep.
I agree with Nina.
Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting, the business meeting?
Yes,
So-
this is Tom Wilson. I motion.
This is Nina. I second.
Made and seconded to adjourn the business meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay.
I'm getting too old for this.
Nay.
What? Now we can't leave.
Nay.
John?
Everyone. Yes, sir.
George Allen, would you private email me with just a very brief synopsis of the Junior Telescope program? Just a few simple facts. I have not heard of it.
I can send you the email I got from the Misrule mailing list.
And it has information that would be fine, John.
It's very basic.
Very basic, George. I'll see if I can. This is all centered around what the current Astronomical League youth director is wanting to do. If you have not met her, she's Peggy Walker. I'm sure you've heard of her.
I have met Peggy Walker.
Okay. She's the one that was her idea to start this. Yeah, we can talk, or I can email you, or we can talk offline.
George, in a nutshell, it's something that will happen at next year's national convention. So we have plenty of time.
Now it's social time.
Oh, we
Now
want
you
to
can
quit the
comment.
recording then.
Yes. Thank you. I
Hey,
have to
John,
find
did you
it.
see my text about the 26th? I think it showed up on your computer screen also.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I just didn't, we were running out of time and I didn't need to jump in
Yeah.
there and blah, blah, blah. But
Eric, he looks like Rem.